Hello students. In this video we're going to have a very basic look at another node called the animation player. And the animation player is actually really powerful, and it doesn't have to just do with what most people think of as animation, which is moving images around the screen. It basically is a very powerful tool for controlling and managing almost anything within your game based on timing. So we're going to see a very basic version of how this works by changing the animation of our coin so that when our player walks into them, they sort of bounce up into the air before disappearing. So adding that extra bit of pizzazz, if you like, to the way our diamonds here work. As I've been doing, I'm using the basic tutorial that we have worked on in our class. It may be different to what you're currently using, and the link to this particular tutorial is available down here if you'd like to go check it out. So let's have a look at what is going to happen. So the first thing is I'm going to go into my coin scene. So in my scenes folder at the moment, I have my coin scene. And at the moment, if I have a look at the script for this, there's really two main things going on. There's this process that is doing this rotation. Now, I'm going to comment this out because it does have a strange effect on our animation a little bit later, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And because I have commented out everything in this function, I am just going to put the pass command in there. I could technically delete this whole function because I don't currently need it, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. The other thing that's really going on is this function that's being called by a signal, so that when the body enters this particular coin, so when in this case the player enters and we determine that is the player, we are collecting the value, so telling it to add to our score basically, and then deleting it. So that's what takes it off our screen. But we want to have that coin to look like it bounces up a little bit. And this is what we're now going to do. So from our coin, we're going to add a new node called AnimationPlayer. Now, there are a couple of animation things. Make sure you're getting the player and not the tree or tree player. They are different. So we're going to put the animation player. I'm happy just to leave it with that name for the moment. You could obviously rename it if you would prefer, but I'm going to stick with that name. Now, what that gives us down the bottom here is a new animation pane that we can control our animations from. And by default, of course, there are no animations made. So I'm going to click on animation down here, and I'm going to create a new one. And I'm going to call this collect. Now, the name that you're typing in here is what you're going to refer to this animation by when you want to start and stop it, and also check if it's running. An individual node like this can have several animations. So you might have an animation for when it collects, a different animation for while it's just sitting there, which is where we could recreate that rotating animation if we want, that we commented out a moment ago. You might have a different animation for different things colliding with it. So maybe you've had a player 2, you might have a different animation for when they collect their coin. So you can have multiple animations, as you'll sort of see in a moment. But we'll call this one collect. And you can see we now have a track. And that's the beauty of animation players, is that you can put multiple tracks, and even within tracks you can have multiple actions. So you can have, a track that we call collect, and that's run at a certain time. You could have an idle track that's rotating, as I said. You could have a player 2 track, and so on. So you can have multiple tracks that you can call as you need to. But this one, we've called it collect, and we want to add to that. So we're going to add a track to it, and we're just going to call a property track. Now, property tracks is, in my opinion, why this is so powerful, because a property track allows you to basically set, based on time, any value pretty much from your inspector. So all these things over here that we can modify, we can basically add them in and have them change over time, which makes it super powerful to do things that otherwise could take quite a bit of coding. So we're going to do a property track for the moment, and you can look into more of these if you like later. Probably the other one that's super useful is the call method, which again basically allows us to call any other script or method that we like. So if we've written something really powerful to do something, but we want to run it at a certain time, again, you could do this through an animation. But let's stick to our property track for the moment, okay? And we'll just let it go into the coin, that's fine, and press OK. And we're going to do this based on, sorry, I'll actually do that a little bit differently, I think. I won't do it through there. I'll add the track manually. So what I'm going to be doing is changing just the sprite position. I think that this is going to be a better way to do it, actually. Sorry about that little bit of a jump there. So what I want is an animation, and this is going to go for half a second. So I'm going to start by changing the total time down the end here to 0.5. Okay, and that you can see now the section that I have is 0.5 for my animation. I can zoom in a bit just to, oops, wrong way, just to see just that bit of time if I want, just like that. Okay, now at time 0 of the animation, I want my sprite's position, so in transform position, to be at 0, 0. I want it to be where it should be at the time. So I add this into my track by clicking this little keyframe icon here, and it'll ask me how I want to add this. I can use Bezier curves or Bezier curves. I don't really know how you say that, to be honest. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to say create. And what I've got is a little thing here saying that at this moment in time, at 0, 0 in this case, I have a keyframe. And that keyframe is going to set the position to the values of 0, 0 in this case. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the end of my animation, the 0.5 second. I'm going to change my position value. So I wanted this to bounce up a little bit. So up in game development is often, well, it's always about changing the Y value, but it usually means making the value negative. An interesting fact that may or may not have been discussed with you is if you think about the screen, and this was the top corner of the screen, let's say, X obviously increases as it goes to the right hand side, but in a lot of game development environments, including Godot, this is considered Y for, 0 for Y, and it actually increases as it goes down the screen. So for our sprite, in fact, to go up the screen, we have to go in a negative direction. So I'm going to make that approximately -50, and you see that my sprite has moved up. What I want to do is add a new keyframe in with these values. So my position on my animation is at the at the end at 0.5 seconds, and I add a new keyframe in at that value. And now if I move through this just by clicking through it, or in this case dragging through it, you can see as it clicks through the times how my sprite would move until it gets to the top there. Okay, so now I've created this animation that would move through. And in fact, I can press play on this animation to see what it will look like. So if I press the play button here, it will move like that to the top. Okay, I can make that repeat. So I've just clicked the little repeat option there, and in theory, it would do this. Not really what I want, but that's okay, because really all I actually want is to bounce up, and then it's going to still disappear. It's not going to just suddenly drop back down. Of course, you could do a longer, or you could change it where you have a top of the bounce and bring it back down again. And again, you could play around with all sorts of options with it. But for now, I'm going to stop that, and I'm also going to turn off the option of having it repeat down here, because I don't want it to repeat. And just for the sake of right now, I'm going to put it back to 0 just because I prefer it to sit there. All right, so we've made our track, and the animation we can see works, but now how do we use that? So let's go back into our script, and we're going to add some values down here to this body entered. So the first thing I want to do is to not destroy this coin straight, not to free it from the queue straight away. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that just by commenting out for a second. I'm now going to access that animation player. Now, because the animation player is a child of our coin node where the script is, I can access it purely by the $sign. If your animation player was in some other location, I guess, you would have to make sure you had a proper path and were able to get to that node, and you might need to look at some other tutorials or get some help on how to do that. But in most cases, your animation player is probably going to be a child of the node that or the scene that you're working with. So this is probably going to work for you. But I can access it, as I said, with the $ symbol. or $, and I'm going to access the play function, and inside that play function I have to put the name of the timeline that I wanted to run, and you can see it's giving me a suggestion, and it's the only one I've got, which is the collect animation. So this basically says start or play the collect animation, the one that we just created. So if we save that now and we go and play our game, let's see what happens. So at the moment, they have stopped rotating because we did comment that out earlier, remember? And they're certainly not bouncing up and down. But what we hope is that when we move into it, there you go, it went up. But it hasn't disappeared because we did get rid of the queue free. And we can see each one of those will now work as we supposedly collect them. It's still giving us our score up here because that hasn't changed, but they've moved up into that bit of space. They're not gone, and so you can see if I sort of technically collide with them again, because the collision is still actually here, it does the animation again, which is not really what we want, but we can see we're getting there. We do have the animation working. But what we now need is a way to still free these coins or get rid of them once they've been collected, so we can't collect them multiple times. And we're still going to need to do that by freeing them from the queue, or queue freeing. But we want to make sure we only do that at the end of the animation. And again, there are a few ways you can do that, but I'm going to do it with a signal. I like this method because it lets you do multiple things potentially for different types or different animations that you might have. Again, I've only got one in this instance, so it's kind of easy, but I like this method. So again, with my animation player, okay, selected now, I'm going to look at the nodes and the signals, and there is an option or a signal for when the animation is finished. So let's link that in. And what it does is it calls this every time it finishes or gets to the end of an animation, and it has the name of that animation as its value. So we're going to do a very, very simple check, very much like the if body name player, right? We're going to do a check about which animation has just finished. So we're going to say if, and we're going to use the name that it has here. If you really want to change his name, you could, but that's what it came with by default. So if the value inside there is equal to, and we have a animation called collect, then we want to do something, okay? And that something is going to be queue free. We're going to get rid of the the whole coin, okay? If by some chance a different animation had just played, then we won't be deleting it because it won't match the collect value, the name of this animation. So let's see if that now works. So we run our animation again. This time we should see it hit, and there you go, it's gone. So we can't get that one again because it has in fact been deleted. So let's move over to this one, and then this one, and there you go. The intention seems to have worked. However, it does seem very slow, doesn't it? So it takes a long time to go up, and that doesn't quite seem very good to me. So let's do a quick change of that. So we're going to come back to our animation, and instead of taking half a second, let's move this in so we can actually move this keyframe in, and let's go around, I don't know, around there for a minute, and we'll just shrink the animation as well. Now this is kind of important because the keyframe would happen here, but if we left it with a time of 0.5, it would still be half a second before it got to the end and triggered this signal. So it is important that we move this down. So let's say 0.25, okay, and we'll move this a little bit closer to the end. Now, if it's not going exactly how you want, again, it might be a case of deleting that keyframe, which we can do. So we'll delete that key frame there. We will move to the end of our time frame, and we can easily add that back in. Oh, the reason this is not working actually is because I've got a 0.2 sort of block, if you like. It's a little bit like the grid. It's the amount of time that it is letting me go in jumps of, if you like. So I'm going to change that to 0.1 to give myself better resolution or better control of how much it's changing. And of course, because I'm only going to go by 0.1, 0.25 is not going to work. In fact, let's make it 0.05 to get that accuracy that I'm really looking for. So let's bring this back to the end of the animation. Still doesn't seem to want to go there for some reason. Not sure why that is, but okay, you know what? I'm going to really quickly kill this one and just make it again. So if we look at our animation for our sprite, the inspector will start at 0, 0. It's all 0 there. That's good. So we will add that in, and then we'll go to the end of our animation. Again, I really don't know why it's determined not to go to the end. Oh, my resolution's changed again. I didn't notice that. 0.05. Good. Let's try bringing that to the end now. It does seem to be stuck. Oh well, let's just go with it anyway. We'll put in our -50 here. Okay, and we'll keyframe that again. So it's running there. Let's see what that looks like. From the start would help. It's certainly a lot quicker, isn't it? So let's try it with a loop just for a second. Yeah, that's a lot quicker movement. All right, we will turn off the loop and let's see what that looks like in game. So let's save the scene and we will run it and see what it looks like. So when I hit that, yep, that is looking a bit better. Now you might just notice that they've started a bit higher right now, and that is simply for the fact that when I saved this scene, I had it partway through my animation and it was up here. So that is where it believes the sprite should be. So let's very quickly put that back to 0 so it starts from its correct location, resave the scene, and let's have another look at that. So you do have to be a little bit careful if you're using properties in your animation players that you have everything where you want it to be as its default, if you like, when you save a scene. Otherwise, it might get a bit weird looking, but they're easy to fix. So there you go, that's looking a bit better. I hit the coin, it bounces away reasonably fast. I'm pretty happy with that. So that's sort of a really quick introduction to AnimationPlayer and how it can be used to change values that you would have to do a lot of coding for otherwise. So see if that helps you. It certainly might make it more efficient for you to create some interesting movement in your game, and hopefully you can use this AnimationPlayer to make your game look really interesting. So have a go. If you're in one of my classes, of course, feel free to approach me for some assistance. Otherwise, I hope in some way this video has been useful for you.